This podcast is made possible by Planful.
Hi, this is Jeff Brannon, CFO of Oversight Systems, and you're listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 852.
You really got to double down into the things that are going to prove out the unit economic model. Are my reps going to be productive enough? Am I getting the gross margins on the deals that are going to suggest that I'm going to have that path to profitability down the road? And in the beginning, those were the two main things that I looked at was how do we ensure we're on the right growth path? And how do I ensure that we're getting the transactions that are coming in at that productivity, at the right gross margin? You have those two things, you know that over time you can get to your path to profitability that you need to.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Jonathan Carr, CFO of Armis. Back in 2008, having finished college only 18 months earlier, Jonathan Carr was now the accounting and finance lead for a major software implementation underway at Stryker's Puerto Rican plant. To succeed in his new role, Carr would need to have local managers as well as senior IT executives walk him through the manufacturing plant's transaction processes, allowing him to understand how the software's promise of automation could be leveraged to streamline the plant's accounting close cycle. Today, looking back at this early career chapter, Jonathan Carr tells us you have to find opportunities that'll either get you promoted or fired. Jonathan Carr shares that insight and much more on today's episode. We begin after this. With so much change around us and your need for increasing agility, you have to equip your team to win, and you have to do it now. Join over 1,300 companies of all sizes using Planful to help plan and execute with greater confidence. Planful integrates your critical financial processes to serve the data you need, insights you demand, and the answers necessary to manage your business optimally. Planful lets you plan better, close faster, and report more accurately. And Planful's not just for finance and accounting. It's for the entire business to plan, collaborate, and drive increased financial performance. Take full control of how you administer and manage all of your financial processes and data, and put finance first collaboration at the heart of every decision. When finance is a team sport, you can be a champion. With Planful, you'll be a champion of finance. Get in the game by going to planful.com to learn more. Hello, we're speaking with Jonathan Carr, CFO of Armis. Jonathan, welcome.
Thanks, Jack. Happy to be here and happy to be talking to your audience.
So, Jonathan, we always begin by asking our guests to look back for us and to identify those experiences they feel prepared them to be a finance leader. What come to mind for you?
Yeah, there's a lot of experiences, but I think one of the first ones that really comes to mind was actually one of my first career opportunities. I was working in a medical device company named Stryker, and I had a controller of our division. It was a very personable person. I think me coming straight out of college into this role, one of his biggest pieces of advice that he gave to me early on, and I worked for him for just under 6 years, was to find the opportunities that either get you promoted or fired. And by that, what he really meant was get yourself out of your comfort zone, do things you have no idea how to do, and that's going to grow you exponentially. And through my experiences there, he gave me a lot of those opportunities. I think one of the earliest ones I was only at the company for about a year and a half. And we were in the process of implementing Oracle. I won't tell you which version it was because I'll probably date myself a little bit. But we were implementing Oracle at our Puerto Rico manufacturing plant, and I had never done systems work or financial systems work, but he put me as the entire accounting and finance team lead on that project to work with the manufacturing plant, to work with the IT organization, and to find ways to automate ultimately a lot of the intercompany accounting transactions and streamline the close cycle. So it was a 6-month project, learned a lot about really digging into things and thinking about things almost as an onion, right? Like you think you understand how something works or what people are doing, and you peel back that layer. And then you realize, okay, there's 2 other things that might be at play here. And then you figure those out, and then it just keeps going. And so I think that lesson of giving people the opportunity to stretch themselves, to get out of their comfort zone, to peel back the layers and really understand what's happening, I think those are the types of things that, as a leader, are important for us to be able to give to our teams.
Were you just sort of said, okay, you're the lead, make it happen? And I mean, for you, did that mean I better bring some key people together and begin picking their brains as to how we take the next steps here, or where do you begin?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, and it was across a handful of disciplines, right? So first thing I went to go figure out is, okay, well, here, what are the challenges that we face today in our monthly close process, for example? Where are the headaches? What are the things that are causing time? Let's think about, if I could get this part automated through the system, this could save us a bunch of time or variance, reduce risk, whatever the case may be. Second was really understanding with the folks at the manufacturing plant, what does the process look like? What are the steps in which, you think about Oracle, transactions happen as, for example, they're scanned through a manufacturing plant. So where are those steps? How do I understand where things are in the process to know how that works? And then lastly, it was with the IT folks, the people familiar with the system. What are the things that we could get creative on to make it work in a way that we care about that may not be the traditional way of thinking about it? And so I was getting those folks together and really understanding, okay, well, here's our timeline. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. Let's talk about what we can do. And yeah, it was definitely a cross-functional effort. And yeah, I do think having perspectives, I'm a huge believer that perspectives outside of your discipline make you better at your job. And that's a big part of how I approach kind of what I do and how I try to encourage my team to work.
You made an investment of 5 years there or more, and then you move on. What are you looking for when you leave Stryker? What is it that you're you're a bona fide finance executive at that point, so you're definitely climbing sort of a traditional ladder in FP&A, or would you put it another way?
Yeah, I would say it was definitely more traditional. Stryker was a Fortune 500. Definitely went through the FP&A route, spent some time in AR and collections, got some chance to spend time with customers. And I think really when I left Stryker, what I was looking for was one, growth. I think Stryker had long been a 20% grower for decades and decades. And that was something that I really thrived in. It was finding an environment that was going to grow, and how I could take what I've learned to kind of harness that growth and enhance it. The other piece was just great people. I'm a huge believer. If you look at my career trajectory, I've gone to places and I've worked with people that I found I resonate with, that are highly ambitious but low ego. I think that's a pretty unique combination, particularly in Silicon Valley. And so when you find those, I think those are great opportunities, both for your personal learning and then just your satisfaction in what it is that you're doing.
Are you headed towards a VP level appointment at that point? Where do you think of yourself?
Yeah, so I think at the time when I was making the transition, I was a little bit level agnostic, but I was mostly interested in getting into technology. In the medical device industry, obviously we had a lot more manufacturing, a lot of kind of core cost accounting type focus. And what I really wanted to get into was technology. And so for me, I focused more on what's the organization where I'm going to get unique experiences that can add to how I think. And the company I came across was called SurveyMonkey. And when I joined SurveyMonkey, it's a pretty large brand. I think most people have probably taken a survey from them at some point in their life or career. We were sub 100 million in revenue. The FP&A team wasn't built out at the time. So really just had this opportunity to come in and start thinking about how do you take an organization that is growing organically and add strategic levers to it. I mean, I think a couple of years prior to my joining, an investor came in to a business that had significantly strong EBITDA margins. I mean, I'm talking about north of 70, 80%. And the thesis was well, very clearly, there's opportunity to invest for future growth. And so joining the organization, having an opportunity to build a finance team that adds strategic levers, I think that's what excited me ultimately to join.
Seems to me you kind of had the, FP&A roadmap in your back pocket. You had thought of yourself as an FP&A executive, and you built your career taking the steps that FP&A executives do. Am I right about that, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think of myself as having come up through FP&A. I mean, I think in general, whatever your avenue, and I do believe there are many avenues to the CFO seat. I'm a huge believer that you make a role bigger than whatever title or whatever it is that it may suggest. And so, where I've been able to find opportunities to do more than what was core FP&A, I think that's what sustained me. Um, I personally, and this is how I hire for my teams too, I look for anybody in any capacity, in particular for FP&A, that thinks about the company as a bigger picture. Not so much okay, I've got to do budget versus actual and I've got to do these things. It's the folks that can come in and say, here's what's important to the company. And then beyond that, to whoever my business partner is, what do they care about? How do I help them get what they want while making sure the company is getting the financial results that we need? Because ultimately, to me, influence is earned, and there are many ways to get to your financial objectives. And I think the ones that enable you to influence and that are sustainable over time are the ones that you help other people win at the same time. And so that's been a big piece for me as I think about my career: is where can I stretch myself? Can I get involved in investor relations or raising capital, even though that may not be what my normal job is? Like just finding those opportunities to get yourself outside of your core day. One, it stretches you. Two, it made me better at FP&A. Like my perspectives were no longer, I just need to get to a number. It was, okay, here's what's important for, the CEO or the investor. Like knowing the lens of other people made me better at what I was doing in FP&A.
Again, you make a 6-year investment at Survey Monkey. So again, just revealing, not unlike a lot of our finance leaders, you make that investment of years at the companies you've been with. And professionally now, I would think the leadership role is coming into focus, where you'd like to go. Maybe someday I'll step into that CFO role someday soon, maybe, don't know. As a leader, how do you begin to grow those skills?
Yeah, I think, fortunately for me, SurveyMonkey was one of those unique opportunities over the 6 years where it was almost like three or four organizations. We went through a lot of transformation. We did a lot of unique things. We raised almost $1.8 billion in capital, of which only less than 100 million was primary. So we did a lot of very interesting things to turn over shareholders, to give employees liquidity. And so it created a lot of these unique opportunities where I got to go through a process of raising capital, and I got to go through a process of acquiring several companies. And for me, like all of those things, where you might say, okay, well, I've done this thing, now it's time for my next job. All of a sudden I was in the midst of what that next role was, and I didn't have to go anywhere. And so for me, I've personally enjoyed really making an investment in an organization and spending time with them and finding those opportunities that are essentially new roles along the journey. And to me, that's ultimately, kind of how I got here. I think, my next opportunity, which I know we'll get to, will be the exception, right? I was not at Atlassian for the same 5-6 year stint.
And Atlassian again was a top FP&A role there as well. And from there, you step in to the CFO office at Armis in short order. So maybe we can segue there. We might have a few more career-related questions, I think, a little later for you. But tell us about Armis. This is where you step in. And what was it, 2020, you step into the CFO office there. So you've been there 2 years now. It's good to catch up at this moment in time. You got some perspective now, a few quarters under your belt. But tell us about Armis. What type of company is this? What does it do? What are its offerings?
Armis is in the cybersecurity space. The industry, of course, can be very fragmented, but I think what's unique about what we're doing in cybersecurity, you could think of it almost as akin to a lot of traditional endpoint security, except we approach everything as completely agentless. So if you think about in manufacturing world or in healthcare, there's a lot of devices or assets you might have on your network that can't have a software agent. And that's where we really come into play. We give you complete visibility into everything that's on your network. In the world we're operating today, environments, maybe only 5 6% of things on the network can actually house an agent. And so we give you complete visibility into everything. I think the simplest way to understand Armis is to think about Armis is effectively the Google Maps of your enterprise network. Whatever you wanted to see, where it is, any piece of contextual information, the OS it's running, the last time it was patched, any piece of that contextual information, that's what we offer. And we help bring order to existing telemetry or things like CMBDs where you're trying to get the lay of the land of all of the things on your network, but it's messy and there's duplicates. We help you bring order to that kind of enterprise network challenge, and it helps you really focus on the things that are going to matter in cybersecurity.
Could you maybe give us a shorthand, abbreviated view of its capital structure through the years, or how it raised money, where it is today?
Yeah, absolutely. So Armis was founded in 2015. We first went to market in 2017. Really, I think it went through a handful of VC-backed and private equity raises throughout the years. When I joined in October 2020, earlier that year in January, Insight Partners, who was an existing investor on the cap table, Armis was going for its, I guess it was Series D at the time. Ultimately, Insight said, hey, this is a huge opportunity. Really happy with how the company is executing. We're going to come in and really give you the capital you need to focus less on raising capital and focus more on growing the 100-year company. And so in January 2020, they invested a significant portion at $1 billion valuation. 3 months after I joined, I guess we closed it 3 months after I joined Armis, but in very short order, in Feb of 2021, actually, we closed a round with a company called Brookfield. They very much, they came in and valued Armis at a $2 billion valuation. But for us, what we were looking through it was really a partnership, somebody who could give us exposure to real estate industry and industries that we may not have a large customer footprint in. I think one of the unique things about Armis, and I'll come back to the capital structure in a second, is that our technology is vertical agnostic. I think if you look at the competitive landscape, most of the players there are very vertical or niche oriented. And by that, I mean, there's strong players in OT and manufacturing security. There's strong players in healthcare. There's very few, if any, that can span the vertical structure the way that Armis can. And I think that's pretty unique for us. And then going back to capital, at the end of 2021, and I'd love to take credit for the timing, certainly on the raise here, given the current macro environment. But we met another organization called One Equity Partners, and they were heavily invested in infrastructure businesses and other things that we wanted to continue to grow our exposure to as well. And so we've always been VC and private equity backed capital. We have no debt on the organization. And so, yeah, that's kind of the history of the capitalization.
So as always, we like to understand better those performance measures that you pay close attention to, or those numbers that you look at first thing every morning. What would those be?
Yeah, I think that the numbers and the metrics that I primarily focus on are first and foremost going to be related to growth. And that was true the day that I came in. I think throughout all of my years, one of the things that has been clear to me, growth certainly at this stage, and in particular for us in cyber when the market is evolving so rapidly, that is the number one thing. And so how do I get a pulse on that? Obviously, from a lagging indicator, looking at the business we close in any given period is great. But what I look to indicate, should I be adding more fuel to the investment fire or not? I spent a lot of time really looking at, among our tenured sales reps, what does their productivity look like? Does it look like I'm getting the right return for the investment that we're making? And in a high growth environment, that's often muddied when you look at things in the aggregate picture, right? When you layer in all these new regions or all these new folks that you're adding in, it's really hard to see the productivity. And so you really got to double down into the things that are going to prove out the unit economic model. Are my reps going to be productive enough? Am I getting the gross margins on the deals that are going to suggest that I'm going to have that path to profitability down the road? And in the beginning, those were the two main things that I looked at was, how do we ensure we're on the right growth path? And how do I ensure that we're getting the transactions that are coming in at that productivity, at the right gross margin? You have those two things, that over time you can get to your path to profitability that you need to. And certainly in the environment we're in today, there's a lot more focus on path to profitability. And I think as I've spent time with investors and as I think about how our team is really thinking about operating this business, it's not so much how do I get to a point where I'm cash break even tomorrow. That's wonderful. That's great. I think that's coming. But what's more important is how do I make sure that I'm growing at unit economics that suggest if I'm putting $1 in, I'm getting 4 back. And in a market that's evolving and growing rapidly, I see no reason to shy away from our ability to do that and get that kind of return. And I think that's consistent with what investors are telling us.
Is there some number related to that, to the unit economics that you realized you need to expose earlier in the process to give people the heads up so they can respond and maybe correct course?
Yeah, I think early on, especially as you join small organizations, the data with which you have to kind of make a lot of these decisions can be kind of muddy. So you start with some of the aggregated things and belief systems. And I'm a big believer you don't wait for perfection to drive decision making. You come up with the things that you want to ultimately measure, and you start working towards that, and you make decisions, and you learn along the way. I think one of my early mentors used to say, I reserve the right to get smarter. I'm a huge believer in that. I make a decision today. Next week, if I learn something new, fine, I'll make a new decision. That's okay by me. And so I think really just as we onboarded reps, for example, we looked at a handful of things. What are the regions for the business that are seeing success, where there's a customer need and a willingness to buy? And in the first 6 to 9 months, am I seeing the activities that suggest this person might be successful? Obviously, in enterprise sales, regardless of the industry you're in, the sales cycles and time horizons, they take time. So early on, you're going in with an investment thesis, and then you're looking for the things that are going to prove that out that you can fine tune.
We want to touch on the workforce and talent with you, and clearly the sales talent that it takes to get the growth numbers that you're hoping to in an organization that's sending the right signals to its investors. Want to understand better your talent mindset and whether you think it's evolved in some way since stepping into the CFO role.
Yeah, I think I've long been a believer, even prior to the CFO role, that talent is super important, and by that I mean making sure that you find the right people for your organization. And somebody who was great in another organization may not be the right one for this one. And I think that is important. And from a financial perspective, I'm also a believer that you find the right talent, that you reward your top performers, whether that's sales or finance or whatever the role may be. At the same time, if things aren't working, I'm a believer that you need to be open, you need to be transparent, you need to give that feedback, give people the opportunity to adjust or course correct. And then if it's not working, then you make the decision to, move on and try something new. I would say what has evolved mostly is, I think more about kind of world-class metrics around compensation a little bit more dynamically. And an example of that, I mean, for a salesperson, I might say, hey, for enterprise SaaS, I want commissions as a percentage of bookings to be X%. I know that's world-class. I know that's where I want to be. But I think since being in the seat, there's a bit of a balance. And I think it's really going into, one, what does my business tell me about what I can get out of that? And by that, I mean, I might be okay paying a high CAC if I've got excellent retention, I've got expansion potential, and I can get that return over time. And more importantly, I might be okay doing that today. I may not be okay doing that in 2 years from now. And so really thinking about where is your business today? Of your investors, what do they care about? Do they want their return in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Are they after the long, the 100-year company? Really understanding what matters and what stage you're in, to me, influences just how aggressively I'm willing to compensate for certain activities. And that's going to evolve. So that, I guess that's what's new to me is I really view this seat as super important, super strategic. And when I say yes or no, it has the ability to influence the outcome of the company's success pretty meaningfully.
Great insight there for us. Thank you. We have a signature question which we like to ask. It usually falls here in the interview, where we just ask for a finance strategic moment. And what is that? Well, it's sometime during the course of your career where you had a moment of insight due to your lines of sight into the organization as a finance executive, and you avoided something maybe, or you pursued something, or you changed up something because of what you saw. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that comes to mind that really shapes kind of how I think and do my role here. It was during a time at Atlassian, actually. We were thinking as an organization, the history of Atlassian had very much been a on-premise, type product. And we were transitioning very heavily into the cloud. And so that the journey on what that transition looked like was a big topic of debate. We were a public company, we had tremendous success. And when you do that kind of transition, in the short term, the economics of everything can change quite drastically. And a lot of times in my history and in finance, we're so focused on delivering the result that we promised, especially as a public organization. And one of the things that I learned a lot about is just having conviction in whatever it is that you want to go after. Ultimately, the leadership team and the founders at Atlassian had a huge belief. We need to get to the cloud and we need to get there as fast as possible. And so we're going to make some choices that may or may not hurt us in the short term, which amazingly after the fact proved to not actually hurt, which was great. But I think beyond thinking about what are the real decisions to make to build that 100-year company, it was communicating them. So first internally, here's why we've got conviction. Here's why we're doing it. This is what it means for us. We're not going to do these things, and here's where it's going to hurt. That full transparency internally was great. We were actually the first enterprise customer for Atlassian products. We did it to ourselves. We put all of our operations on it. It was make or break. There was no fallback. Secondly, we communicated to the investment community. This is what we're doing. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what you're going to see. And these are the things we're going to look at to say we're going to be successful in the cloud. And that proved to be really, really important. I think building that trust, getting everybody aligned, making sure top to bottom everybody is after the same thing, worked really well. And so that's something I carry forward in the role today.
Hi, it's Jack. I hope you're enjoying our talk with CFO Jonathan Carr of Armis. As Jonathan revealed, achieving organizational goals is often about management conviction. It's about building trust and aligning people, getting people behind those convictions. We now return to our interview with Jonathan Carr. And we're going to jump to what we refer to as our mentoring round, where we'll ask you several quick questions intended to inform and inspire future finance leaders. We'd like you to think back again just to that first 30 days after you stepped into this role, thinking about that first month. Is there something, if you could go back in time and tell yourself something, that first 30 days as a CFO, what piece of advice would you give yourself now in retrospect?
Yeah, I think really, especially when you're walking into your first CFO role, you kind of feel like everybody's got their eyes on you, like they expect you to have all of the answers. And so you almost kind of feel obligated to, before you give an answer, like go figure it out, make sure you feel really good about it. Is this going to be the right thing for the organization? And I think as I look back now, I would say, like, don't be afraid to either be wrong or to say, hey, you know what, I don't know, but I'm going to go find out. Like, give somebody that answer right away, as opposed to trying to figure it out and looking confident. I think it's okay to not know. It's okay to make a mistake. And I think you just embrace that and you move forward and you do it openly and in conjunction with other folks. I talked earlier about how I believe other perspectives make you a better finance person. I really believe that. And, if I go and tell my CEO or CTO, like, hey, I don't really know the answer to this, but what are your thoughts on this? I'll go talk to other CFOs. Like, let's figure it out together. It's actually proven to be a great way to build trust and just be open. Like, I think there's nothing wrong with going and saying, hey, I'm in the seat, but I'm going to learn as I go. That's great. Like, I think you putting that effort forward and being open about it is a great thing.
We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side for us. And we're wondering if you have maybe a personal habit or some part of a daily routine that you're known for. This might be something a family member would know and point out, or a colleague who has known you over years. Maybe that's how Jonathan does things. That's just what his way. I don't know, but is there a personal habit or routine that you're known for?
I would say the biggest thing ultimately is, I guess, is an approach to life, and I guess largely it's an even keel approach. I think when I was at Stryker, the president of our division would often say, "Don't let the highs be too high or the lows be too low." And I think it's taking everything in stride. When things are tough, it's just continuing to move forward, knowing that things are gonna get better. You're gonna find your way through. And when things are great, you celebrate that win and you get back and you focus on what's gonna get you that next win. I would say my routine is really adaptability. I think, the pandemic, I've got a 4-year-old son at home. My wife is a C-level executive at a public company. The ability to adapt and be dynamic throughout the day. Something pops up. Okay, I'm going to move this around, and just be able to handle that, I think, is what is one of the things that I think is unique to me, but I think is important in the world we live in today.
Jonathan, would you have a book recommendation for us?
Yeah, I really like it's a bit of an older book, but there's a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. Excellent book, and it's a really great thing for CFOs and leaders, in any part of the organization to really read. He shares a lot of great examples of the years where he was running companies, and some things that are ultra relevant today in the midst of a layoff environment, making the hard choice to be open, say, hey, as a leadership team, we failed, we made the wrong call, and here we are. Like, this is the path forward. Let's talk about it. And just being transparent with the organization. This is where we're at. If you are in it, let's do this together. And if you want to go, like, I understand, I'm going to help you find your next thing. That's just one of many great examples of very difficult situations, and approaching them with let's not find the thing that makes me comfortable. Let's figure out what actually is going to help my team. What's going to help the employees? What's going to help my investors? And if that's difficult for me, fine, embrace that, do what the hard thing is, and move forward.
So we're up to our final question. We're going to ask you to look forward the coming 12 months, and we'd like to know what your priorities are as CFO of Armis.
Yeah, I think, in the midst of this environment, and certainly more focus on Rule of 40, profitability, I'm still a big believer, and I've seen this in multiples today, and as I've talked to investors, growth is still number one, but I'm putting a lot more emphasis on growth and the story behind the growth, and proving out the ROI for every part of the investment profile. I'm a big believer that so much of a company's success is telling their story. And so really understanding, for every dollar I'm putting in R&D, here's what we're doing. We're launching something organically, or we're taking care of tech debt that enables this, like whatever that case may be, being able to clearly articulate, here's what we're investing in, and we delivered it. Okay, next year, here's what we're investing in, we delivered it. Those are the things that are going to build trust. And those are the things that are going to be required to just continue to be successful. So that's really where my focus is going to be over the next 12 months.
Jonathan Carr, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks, Jack. Happy to be here.
Hello, listeners. Do us a favor. Be certain to subscribe to CFO Thought Leader on Apple Podcasts, or if you're an Android user, check us out on Spotify or Google Play. If you like the show, please recommend it to a friend.